Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and this is the Roccat Pyro, an affordable mechanical gaming keyboard from Roccat that sports a number of really nice features. And I'm going to unbox and review this keyboard for you now and talk to you about what it's like to use, what I like about it, and what I don't, and the various features of it. Now, as you can see, this is a fairly nice looking mechanical gaming keyboard, which sports some nice accents to it that include a brushed aluminium backplate, a dedicated volume wheel, a dedicated game profile switching button which allows you to deactivate certain buttons when you're gaming, and a nice setup that includes not only Roccat's wonderful AIMO intelligent lighting but also Roccat's Easy-Shift technology, which allows you to add a secondary layer of actions to your buttons. And I'm going to talk to you more about that later on near the end of the video, where I cover off the Roccat Swarm technology and how that works with the Pyro. Now, I've been using the Pyro for a while now, but I want to talk to you about what it's like to use and the various things about it that make it interesting. As I go through this unboxing video, I'm going to show you what is included in the box and talk to you about the various features of it. It's worth noting before we get started that this uses TTC mechanical switches. They're red linear mechanical switches that are very similar to Cherry MX switches but are not the same. They do, however, have the same specs. They're linear with 45 grams operating force, 2mm actuation, and 4mm total travel. They're also guaranteed up to 50 million keystrokes in the same way that Cherry MX switches are, and therefore, with the other accents of this keyboard, such as that durable aluminium backplate and other design things, you should find that this keyboard lasts for quite some time. It's designed to be durable and also comfortable to use and convenient as well. It has, as you can see, a detachable palm rest that you'll be able to see here, and that attaches nice and easily to the keyboard itself and also comes off again if you want to remove it. I'm going to show you the process for that in a second, but you'll see it's not particularly attractive. It's also made of plastic, it's not padded in any way, and it has a ridged effect on it. It's very similar to the Roccat Magma keyboard, which I reviewed recently, and it has the same issues that one did as well, in that it's a bit of a dust magnet. Now, it does look like it's going to be quite uncomfortable, but I'm happy to report that it isn't. What you will notice also, which is quite nice, is underneath both the palm rest and the keyboard themselves, there are a number of rubber feet on the underside. Also have a ridged effect here, and that basically means that it doesn't move around on the desk and it sits in place nicely. Also looks quite cool under the lighting. You also have feet to adjust the angle and the height of the keyboard, and it is fairly low profile. It's not incredibly low profile, but it does sit quite low to the desk, and I'll show you some shots of that in a second. And as a result, it has been quite comfortable to use for that. It certainly doesn't have low profile keycaps or anything, but it isn't a big chunky monkey either. And the overall aesthetic is very nice for the amount of money you're paying. Now, I'm going to do a video separately where you'll be able to hear the key sounds, and I'll link to that in the description. I know people like to hear just the key noises, but for a second I'm going to be quiet so you can hear a quick sample of them. As I said, these are TTC linear switches. They're very similar to Cherry MX red switches, and they are not obnoxious. They're not too scratchy, they're not too loud. They're fairly loud because they're mechanical switches, but they're not really loud. They're not uncomfortable to type on. It has been quite a pleasure to type on, even after going from the membrane keyboard in the Roccat Magma, which is very quiet and very comfortable. This thing has still been a delight to use. It is worth noting, however, that these are not PBT double shot keycaps. They do look like they are ABS plastic, and therefore they probably will wear down over time. However, they do let through a fair amount of light bleed. Now, as you can see with the keycaps off, the housing on the TTC switches is clear, so that does mean you get some nice RGB lighting through it. Now, I will say that the RGB lighting on this isn't as striking as it was with the Magma that had that back plate, and whether you do have per key illumination here, obviously, instead of zone lighting, and therefore you do get a better overall lighting experience that is adjustable within Roccat's software. And I'll show you more on the lighting later on and how to control it, and talk to you about what you can do with that. Roccat has AIMO intelligent lighting, which has some really nice RGB effects that change depending on what you're doing, what apps you're running, and your general use, and it works quite well throughout the day. Now, I've been using this keyboard for working and for gaming, and day to day it has been a pleasure to type on and to work with. The setup of it is quite nice. There are some interesting highlights to it. As I said earlier on, for example, it has a dedicated media control key, and I'll show you that in a minute, for volume control. But you will notice, if you're paying attention, that in the top corner of the keyboard, in F8 to F12, is the media playback buttons. They're buried within a function key. It's sad to see that they aren't dedicated. So that's a bit of a shame. Here you can see a close-up of the palm rest. You'll note it has this ridged effect I was talking about earlier on. When I initially got this out of the box, I thought it was going to be uncomfortable. And in the same way, I thought of the Magma. It looks kind of scratchy, but actually I'm happy to report it isn't. It also doesn't like leave ridges in your arms if you're using it all day long, so you don't suddenly find you've got stripes on your arms, which is certainly a bonus. And surprisingly comfortable despite the lack of padding. It just sits nicely under the wrists and keeps you nice and comfortable. Also, you can see the height of the keyboard and how it sits. It's got its little feet up here, and yet it's sitting pretty low to the desk, which means your hands aren't jutting up in the air and you've not got your wrists at an awful angle, and therefore it's fairly comfortable. There you can see the volume control wheel, which you can easily adjust the volume on your PC without much problem, and it's a reasonable affair. It's quite quiet to move around. It's reasonable feedback on it. There's nothing too obnoxious about it. I really do feel like it's a bit of a shame they haven't included dedicated media controls and they're buried in the function keys instead, but it's still nice to have an easy access volume wheel. Now there's 1.8 meter USB cable. It's not braided, it's not super fancy in any way, but it gets the job done. Here you can see that you can control the RGB lighting. You can't sadly change the effects on it, but you can adjust the brightness up and down with the function key and the directional keys at the bottom of the keyboard, so you can turn it up and down if you need to on the fly. On the scroll lock, you'll also note the game mode button. That allows you to turn on game mode, which then disables things like the Windows key, so you don't accidentally activate your start menu in the middle of a gaming session, which is always a complaint and a bit of an annoyance if you're doing that. You can see some of the RGB lighting glow here. You'll see, thanks to that ABS design, the RGB lighting glows nicely through the keycaps, and you can see all the lettering. There's no dark spots. This is certainly a bonus of having ABS over PBT double shot, which generally are a bit darker and you can't see the lighting as well. You will note, however, if you've seen my Magma review, that the RGB lighting isn't as bright and as impressive, perhaps, because you don't have that backplate. You don't have as much surrounding RGB lighting, but if you're not bothered about RGB terribly, then this is still a great choice. It's a great looking keyboard with some nice design aesthetics to it. It's worth noting that this is the UK layout, if you're wondering why there's a small left shift and large enter key. That's how we do it in the UK, but you can get other variants. Now, one of the nice things about the TTC switches that I mentioned earlier on is they have a very similar design to Cherry MX switches, and therefore if you have your own custom keycaps that will fit on a Cherry MX style keycap design, then you can swap out the keys. So here I'm using Corsair's PBT double shot mod kit, and I wanted to see if that would fit on the Roccat Pyro, and I'm happy to confirm that it will. So I just ran some red keys around the edging and outer layer of the keyboard, as I thought that might look nice, and they all fit perfectly. So if you have that mod kit, or if you're thinking that you'd like to add some design accents to this keyboard by throwing in some extra colors, then that is an option. Those are also PBT double shot, and you can see that the lighting still shines nicely through them, which means that the Pyro is able to cope and has some nice lighting effects from it that are able to glow nicely through those keycaps too. So the overall result is a very nice looking keyboard and customizable as well, which is nice. So now I'm going to dive into the Roccat Swarm software and talk to you about that. So here we are within Roccat Swarm software. You can see you have a number of options for various things. You can change the sound feedback, which is essentially just gives you a weird different sound, slightly gimmicky noise when you're typing. You can adjust the repeat rates and such in here. And you can adjust the keyboard illumination. Now, as I said, the AIMO intelligent lighting system is the most interesting one. I covered this before on a Roccat Magma review recently, but essentially what it does is it uses intelligent organic lighting to create some visual effects on here that just change slowly throughout the day, depending on what you're doing. You can see you can adjust the brightness up and down from here, but you can also do it with the directional buttons that I showed earlier on. And the lighting will sync with other Roccat products. I showed it previously syncing with the Roccat Cone Pro gaming mouse as well. You can also adjust a number of other settings in here and change with various different effects, and you can see what they'd look like, get an idea of them on here. And you can adjust the speed and the brightness of them. So you can see there's wave, there's snake, which basically just goes across the keys from one key to the next. Kind of neat. And you can change the theme of that, so you can set it for different colors. And it's basically a gradient, for example. It goes from blue to green here, and you can change between those. You can also get fully lit, which has that theme again, or you can choose custom, so you'll see it's set into a variety of zones. Heartbeat, breathing, fade effects. Fade reacts to your typing, so when you're typing, as I'm doing now, you'll see keys lighting up and then dimming again. You have a ripple one, which is this ripples out from the various keys while you're pressing them. The lights come out and flash across. And then there's a custom mode, and you can select the arrow keys, for example, the WASD keys or the main keys. You can select the whole keyboard and go. You can actually drag across various areas and then select a specific color. And you can see that you can change on a per key basis. So for example, you want one particular key to be one specific color, then you can do that. So it's per key illumination, but not in the effects. So you can see overall there's some nice different effects. You can also customize these, and then you can select from a breathing effect. So if we select, for example, the WASD keys, let's go all, and then orange for now, and then we select WASD, and we're going to choose that as white instead. Oh, white-ish. And then we're going to do a breathing effect on that. So now you've got the WASD keys breathing or reacting with a heartbeat, and you can change the speed. So you don't have as many different effects in here, but you can customize them by adding individual lighting colors or some small effects to the keys on a per key basis. And you can see it's really easy to do. You can just drag across, and that's dead simple. Now, the other reason that the Roccat products are fantastic is the Easy-Shift functionality, which you can see is on the caps lock. So Easy-Shift is essentially a secondary action that you'll have for keys. If you click on a key, for example, if I click on W, you can see it says game mode function W, Easy-Shift function W. But what you can do is you can remap this function to be something entirely different. And that can include anything you want from this list. You could, for example, assign a hotkey. So if you go down there and drag that on, you can do this. So now when I press and hold tab and then press W, I then have it do Shift, Control and V, which is paste without formatting. That's obviously a simple little keyboard shortcut, which has now been reduced from 3 key presses to just 2. So holding that Easy-Shift button and pressing that. You do need to activate game mode first though, so you need to press the function key and the scroll lock button in order to activate this, and that will then activate your secondary action. But essentially you can click through the keys and see which ones can be customized. So not the entire keyboard can be reprogrammed, and to be honest, you probably wouldn't want that anyway. But you can see, for example, that the majority of the keys on the left-hand side can be, so they can all have secondary actions. But if you get onto like P, for example, you can't do that, but you can remap those keys still. You'll also see secondary actions for the Easy-Shift are available in the function keys, and the arrow keys and a variety of other ones. So it's really easy to just customize that and do what you want with ease. Sadly, what you will see is there aren't any macro options on here. So you cannot, there's no macro recording functionality, so you can't set up a macro. You can, however, go through a variety of different actions. You'll see there's media control keys. You can set it to open a website, open particular documents, go to your downloads. You can create timers. You can open up a default browser. You can use system actions like an open up task manager, for example. So there's loads of different options in here potentially. And being able to reprogram the keys not only means you can move standard buttons around, for example, the media control keys, but also that you could have a secondary action for easy access to buttons when you're gaming, or if you're trying to optimize for being efficient while working. So a selection of really awesome features, unfortunately lacking macros, but otherwise fantastic. And once again, a brilliant product from Roccat. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful, interesting, hilarious, or otherwise. Take a look at these other videos that I think you might find interesting as well. And have a look at the description for links and other information you might find useful. Click that join button to see the benefits of being a member of my YouTube channel. And most importantly, have a great life.